The foreman's secret. Strip that saddle down and do it right this time, city boy. I froze, my hands trembling against the leather as his shadow fell over me like a storm cloud. Jake Brennan stood 6'4" of pure Colorado rancher, broad shoulders blocking out the afternoon sun, dust settling on his worn flannel and those steel-gray eyes burning holes through my spine. 3 weeks I'd been working his family's ranch, 3 weeks of feeling like I was drowning in a world I didn't understand, and 3 weeks of trying desperately not to stare at the man who made my heart hammer like a spooked horse every time he came near. "Yes, sir," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell leather and pine and something uniquely him that made my stomach flip. "You scared of me, Adrian?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge, like a secret, like something that could shatter everything if I answered honestly. Because the truth was, I wasn't scared of Jake Brennan. I was terrified of what I felt every time he looked at me like that, like he could see straight through the walls I'd spent my entire 22 years building. "Should I be?" I asked, finally turning to meet his gaze. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or something deeper before his expression hardened again. "Stable needs mucking before sundown, get to it." He walked away, his boots heavy against the barn floor, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the sinking realization that this summer was going to destroy me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. Chapter 1: The City Boy. The advertisement had promised authentic ranch experience and find yourself under Colorado skis. What it hadn't mentioned was the backbreaking labor, the 4:30 a.m. wake-up calls, or the fact that I'd be working under a foreman who looked like he'd walked straight out of some romance novel I'd never admit to reading. My parents thought this summer job would help me figure things out before my senior year of college. They thought the mountain air and physical work would clear my head. They had no idea what they'd actually sent me into. Jake Brennan ran the day-to-day operations of the Brennan family ranch, a sprawling 2,000-acre property that had been in his family for 4 generations. His father Thomas owned the place but had mostly retired to the main house after a riding accident left him with a permanent limp. That meant Jake was in charge of the horses, the cattle, the land, and apparently of making my life a beautiful hell. The first week I couldn't do anything right. I'd grown up in suburban Denver where the closest I'd gotten to a horse was a carousel at the mall. Jake seemed to take personal offense to my incompetence. He'd stand there with his arms crossed, jaw tight, watching me struggle with tasks that probably seemed elementary to him. But he never yelled. That was somehow worse. He'd just get this disappointed look in his eyes that made me want to work twice as hard to prove myself. "You ever even held a pitchfork before?" he'd asked on day 3, watching me fumble with the tool while trying to move hay. "In a video game once," I'd replied without thinking. I'd expected anger. Instead, the corner of his mouth had twitched, almost a smile, before he took the pitchfork from my hands. "Like this, balance and leverage, not just brute force." His hands had covered mine for just a moment, adjusting my grip, and I'd felt heat crawl up my neck that had nothing to do with the summer sun. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now I could at least complete my assigned tasks without embarrassing myself completely. The other ranch hands, Marcus, an older cowboy who'd worked there for decades, and 2 college students like me, Tyler and Ben, had warmed up to me. They joked around, included me in their lunch conversations, taught me the ropes. But Jake remained distant, professional, his interactions with me limited to curt instructions and critical assessments of my work. I told myself it didn't matter. This was just a summer job. In 3 months, I'd be back at the University of Colorado, finishing my business degree, and Jake Brennan would just be a memory, a handsome, intimidating memory who made me question things about myself I'd spent years avoiding. The stable was quiet in the late afternoon, most of the horses out in the pasture. I worked methodically, mucking out the stalls, replacing the soiled bedding with fresh straw. The physical labor had gotten easier as my body adapted, muscles developing where I'd only had skinny arms before. My hands, once soft from typing papers and scrolling through social media, now bore calluses and the occasional blister. I was halfway through the 4th stall when I heard footsteps behind me. "You missed a spot." I jumped, nearly dropping the pitchfork. Jake stood in the doorway, backlit by the golden afternoon light streaming through the barn entrance. He'd removed his flannel down to just a white t-shirt that clung to his frame in ways that should be illegal. There was dirt smudged across his forearm and his dark hair was slightly damp with sweat. "Where?" I asked, looking around the stall I'd just finished. He pointed to a corner where, sure enough, I'd left a small pile of soiled hay. My face heated with embarrassment. "Sorry, I'll get it." "You do that?" He didn't move, just leaned against the door frame, watching me. It was unnerving having his full attention like this. Usually, he'd bark an order and disappear to deal with one of the million other tasks that demanded his attention. I cleaned up the missed spot, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. When I finally turned around, ready to ask if there was something else he needed, I found him studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're getting better," he said finally, faster. It was possibly the first compliment he'd ever given me, and I felt ridiculously pleased by it. "Thanks, I'm trying." "Why'd you take this job?" The question came out of nowhere, catching me off guard. "You're clearly not cut out for ranch work, could have gotten some cushy internship in the city." I shrugged, gripping the pitchfork handle. Needed a change of scenery, I guess, wanted to try something different. Running from something. The perceptiveness of the question made me flinch. Isn't everyone? His gray eyes held mine for a long moment, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if he'd push me over or pull me back. Instead, he just nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Finish up here, then you're done for the day. We've got an early start tomorrow, moving the herd to the upper pasture." "Yes, sir." He turned to leave, then paused. "Adrian." "Yes." "You don't have to call me sir, Jake's fine." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the stable with a pitchfork, a pile of dirty hay, and a heart that was beating far too fast for someone who'd just been told his work was adequate. Chapter 2: Cracks in the Armor. The next morning came far too early. I dragged myself out of the small bunkhouse I shared with Tyler and Ben, both of whom were still snoring peacefully in their beds. The sky was just beginning to lighten at the edges, stars still visible overhead as I made my way to the main barn. The mountain air was crisp and cold, making me grateful for the heavy jacket I'd learned to bring on these early mornings. Jake was already there, of course, saddling up his horse, a massive bay gelding named Ranger who seemed to match his owner's temperament, strong, slightly intimidating but reliable. Marcus was there too, along with two other ranch hands I'd only met in passing. "You ever ridden before?" Jake asked as I approached. "Does a pony ride at a birthday party when I was 6 count?" Marcus chuckled, but Jake's expression remained serious. "We'll put you on Daisy. She's gentle, won't give you any trouble if you don't give her any reason to." Daisy turned out to be a sweet-faced mare with a patient disposition, which I deeply appreciated as Jake gave me a crash course in basic riding. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he adjusted my posture in the saddle, though his voice remained all business. "Heels down, shoulders back, use your legs to guide her, not just the reins. She knows what she's doing better than you do, so trust her." Having him so close, his hand resting briefly on my knee as he demonstrated the proper position, made it incredibly hard to focus on his instructions. I nodded, trying to absorb everything while simultaneously trying not to think about the warmth of his touch even through my jeans. The ride up to the upper pasture took over an hour. The trail wound through pine forests and across open meadows, with the Rocky Mountains rising majestically in the distance. Despite my nervousness about riding, I found myself relaxing into the rhythm of it, understanding why people found this peaceful. Jake rode ahead, occasionally looking back to check on the group, his eyes lingering on me a fraction longer than necessary. Or maybe I was imagining it. By the time we reached the upper pasture, my thighs were aching and I was pretty sure I'd have bruises, but I'd managed to stay on Daisy without incident. Jake dismounted with fluid grace and I tried to copy him, only to stumble slightly as my stiff legs hit the ground. His hand shot out, steadying me by the elbow. "Easy, first time's always rough, you'll be sore tomorrow." "I'm sore now," I admitted. That almost smile flickered across his face again. "You did good, better than I expected." We spent the next several hours moving the cattle into the fresh pasture, checking the fence lines, and ensuring the water sources were clean and accessible. It was hard, sweaty work under the climbing sun, but there was something satisfying about it, something real and tangible that my classes in business theory and marketing strategy had never quite captured. During a water break, I found myself sitting on a fence rail next to Marcus while Jake conferred with the other hands about some section of fence that needed repair. "He's tough on you," Marcus observed, taking a long drink from his canteen. "Yeah," I agreed, not sure what else to say. "He's tough on everyone at first, wants to make sure you can handle it before he trusts you with anything important." Marcus glanced over at Jake, then back at me. "But he's fair. Best foreman I've worked under, and I've worked ranches all over the West. He cares about this place, cares about doing things right. How long have you known him? Since he was about 17, running around here during summers while he was trying to figure out if he wanted to take over the ranch or go do something else. His daddy wanted him to go to college, get some business degree, come back and modernize things. Jake went for 2 years, hated every minute of it, came back and never left. I absorbed this information, trying to imagine Jake sitting in lecture halls like I did, feeling trapped and out of place. It was easier than I wanted to admit to picture. He seems like he belongs here, I said. Yeah, he does. This lands in his blood. Marcus stood, stretching his back. But that doesn't mean it's all he is. People are more complicated than the work they do, you know. Before I could respond, Jake called out that break was over, and we all got back to work. That evening, after everyone else had headed back to the bunkhouses or into town, I stayed behind in the barn. One of the younger horses, a filly named Juniper, had seemed slightly off during the day, and I wanted to check on her before turning in. I found her in her stall, restless and pawing at the ground. I was examining her hooves, checking for stones or injuries, when Jake appeared at the stall door. What's wrong? I don't know, she just seems uncomfortable. I was checking to see if maybe she picked up a stone or... Move. It wasn't harsh, just direct. I stepped aside and let him take over, watching as his large hands moved with surprising gentleness over the filly's legs and hooves. He spoke softly to her, calming her with just his voice. After a thorough examination, he found a small piece of wire embedded in her frog, the soft tissue of her hoof. How'd you even notice she was off? He asked as he carefully removed the wire and cleaned the small wound. She wasn't putting her full weight on this leg, just seemed wrong, I guess. He glanced up at me, something like approval in his eyes. Good eye, this could have gotten infected if it had been left overnight. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just got lucky. No, you paid attention, that's not luck. He finished treating Juniper's hoof, then stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Another rich college kid looking for a story to tell at parties. Someone who'd complain about the work, quit after a week. He leaned against the stall door, studying me in that intense way that made me feel exposed. But you're still here. I needed this, I said honestly, even if I didn't know it when I came. Needed what? To figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be who everyone expects me to be. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than I'd intended. Jake's expression softened in a way I'd never seen before, vulnerability flickering across his features like lightning through storm clouds. Yeah, he said quietly, I get that. We stood there in the barn, surrounded by the sounds of horses settling for the night, the smell of hay and leather and earth, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I didn't feel like Jake was my boss or my critic. I felt like maybe, just maybe, he saw me. You should get some rest, he said finally, breaking the moment. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Right, yeah, I moved past him, careful not to brush against him in the narrow doorway, though every cell in my body seemed to want exactly that. Good night, Jake. Good night, Adrian. I walked back to the bunkhouse under a sky full of stars, my mind racing, my heart doing complicated things I didn't want to examine too closely. Tyler and Ben were already asleep, which I was grateful for. I didn't want to explain why I was grinning like an idiot over what amounted to a handful of sentences and a compliment about noticing a lame horse. But as I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, I knew something had shifted, something had begun. And I had no idea what to do about it. Chapter 3: The Breaking Point. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that was both comfortable and torturous. Jake started giving me more responsibilities, teaching me to properly groom the horses, showing me how to check their health, even letting me help with some of the training of the younger horses. We developed an easy working relationship, almost a friendship, though there was always something else simmering beneath the surface. Glances that lasted too long, hands that lingered when passing tools. Moments of standing closer than strictly necessary. I started to notice things about him I hadn't before. The way he always checked on the oldest horses first thing in the morning, giving them extra attention. How he'd slip carrots to his favorite mare when he thought no one was watching. The fact that he read during his lunch breaks, usually thick historical novels or books about conservation, and would get completely lost in them, his usually stern expression softening. Tyler and Ben had noticed something too, though they interpreted it differently. Dude, you're like Jake's favorite now, Tyler said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. He never spent this much time training any of us. That's because you two actually knew what you were doing when you got here, I pointed out. Still, he's different with you, more, I don't know, patient. Ben grinned. Maybe Adrian's the horse whisperer and Jake's figured it out. You should ask for a raise. I laughed it off, but my mind kept turning over Tyler's observation. Was Jake different with me, and if so, what did it mean? The answer came one evening in late July, during what should have been a routine check of the north fence line. We'd ridden out together, just Jake and me this time, as the others were handling different tasks. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost unreal. We worked in companionable silence, checking posts and wire, making notes of what needed replacing. "Storm's coming," Jake said, looking at the horizon where dark clouds were building. "We should head back." We'd barely mounted our horses when the first crack of thunder rolled across the sky. Within minutes, the storm was on us, not the gentle summer rain I'd experienced before, but a full mountain tempest with driving rain and lightning that split the sky in jagged white lines. "There's a line shack about half a mile north," Jake shouted over the wind. "Follow me." We rode hard, the horses picking their way carefully over increasingly slick ground. By the time we reached the small cabin, barely more than a single room with a stone fireplace, we were both soaked through. Jake quickly got the horses under the small overhang that served as a stable, removing their saddles and ensuring they were as protected as possible. Inside the cabin, I was shivering, my clothes plastered to my body. Jake immediately moved to the fireplace where someone, probably him, had left kindling and logs ready. "Get out of those wet clothes," he ordered, not looking at me as he worked on getting a fire started. "There should be some emergency supplies in that chest, blankets, maybe some dry clothes." I fumbled with the old trunk, finding wool blankets that smelled of cedar and, thankfully, a couple of oversized flannel shirts that had probably been there for years. I turned my back, peeling off my soaked shirt and jeans, trying not to think about the fact that Jake was doing the same thing just a few feet away. When I turned around, the fire was crackling to life and Jake was standing near it in just his jeans, apparently the only dry clothes that fit him. In the firelight, I could see every line of his body, the broad shoulders, the defined muscles of his chest and stomach, the trail of dark hair that disappeared below his waistband. I forced my eyes away, but not before he caught me looking. "Warm up," he said gruffly, gesturing to the fire. "Storm like this could last a while." We sat near the fire, the blankets wrapped around us, listening to the rain pound against the roof and the thunder roll overhead. The small cabin somehow made everything feel more intimate, more real. There was nowhere to escape to, no tasks to distract us, just the two of us and the storm raging outside. "You scared of storms?" Jake asked after a while. "Not usually, this one's pretty intense though." "Mountain storms are different, come on fast, hit hard." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. "I love them actually, the raw power of it." "Seems like you," I said without thinking. He glanced at me, eyebrow raised. "Yeah. You're kind of like a storm yourself, intense, a little intimidating, but—" I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "But what?" "But once you're in it, you realize it's not about destruction. It's about power and nature and something bigger than yourself." The look he gave me was unreadable, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "You got me all figured out, city boy." "No," I admitted, "I don't think anyone has you figured out, I think that's the point." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "You ask a lot of questions with those eyes of yours." My heart was suddenly thundering louder than the storm outside. "What kind of questions?" "The kind I don't have answers to." He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made it hard to breathe. "The kind that keep me up at night, the kind that make me question things I thought I'd settled a long time ago." I couldn't look away, couldn't move. The air between us felt electric, charged with something that had been building for weeks. "Jake." "I know I shouldn't," he interrupted, his voice rough. "You work for me, you're leaving at the end of summer, there's 100 reasons why this is a bad idea." This I managed to whisper. Instead of answering, he reached out slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. His hand cupped my jaw, thumb brushing across my cheekbone, and I felt like every nerve in my body had caught fire. "Tell me to stop," he said, his face inches from mine. "Tell me this isn't what you want." But I couldn't say that because it would be a lie. Instead, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt like falling and flying at the same time. He responded immediately, his other hand coming up to thread through my hair, pulling me closer. The blanket slipped from my shoulders as I pressed against him, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine, the rapid beating of his heart matching my own. He kissed me like a man who'd been holding back for too long, like I was water and he was dying of thirst. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Adrian," he breathed, my name like a prayer or a confession. "I know," I said, because I did know. I knew this changed everything. I knew we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. I knew this would make everything more complicated. But in that moment, with the storm raging outside and the fire crackling beside us and Jake's arms around me, I didn't care about complicated. I only cared about this, about him, about the way he made me feel like I was finally completely myself. We spent the night in that cabin, wrapped in blankets and each other, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up on the ranch, about the pressure of being the only son expected to carry on a legacy. I told him about my own struggles, about always feeling like I was performing a role, about being scared to be honest about who I was. "Who are you?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "But I think I'm someone who's falling for a stubborn rancher who makes me want to be braver than I am." He kissed my forehead, gentle in a way that made my chest ache. "You're already brave, Adrian, you just didn't know it yet." Chapter 4: Reality Crashes In. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling. We rode back to the ranch in the early light, not touching but somehow more connected than we'd ever been. I couldn't stop stealing glances at Jake, watching the way the morning sun caught in his dark hair, the way he sat so naturally in the saddle like he was part of the horse itself. But as the ranch buildings came into view, I felt the weight of reality settling back onto my shoulders. What happened now? What did this mean for the rest of the summer, for my job, for whatever this was between us? Jake seemed to sense my anxiety. As we dismounted in the barn, he caught my hand briefly, squeezing it. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. "Okay." I nodded, wanting to believe him, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For a few days, we managed to maintain a careful balance. Professional during the day, especially when others were around, but finding stolen moments, a brief touch passing in the barn, a private smile across the dinner table, a late-night walk to check on the horses that turned into quiet conversations under the stars. It was Tyler who first noticed, though he misread the situation entirely. "Dude, you and Jake have gotten really close," he said one afternoon as we were cleaning tack. "Like, he actually seems to consider you a friend now, not just a hand. That's pretty cool." I mumbled something non-committal, focusing intently on the saddle I was soaping. But Tyler's comment made me realize how visible even our carefully concealed connection had become. And if Tyler noticed, others would too. The real problem came from an unexpected source. Jake's father, Thomas, had mostly kept to the main house since I'd arrived, his bad leg making it difficult for him to get around the ranch easily. But one afternoon, he came out to the barn where Jake and I were working together on training a particularly skittish colt. "Jake, got a minute?" Thomas called out. "Sure, Dad." Jake handed me the lead rope. "Keep him walking the circle, slow and steady." I watched from the corner of my eye as father and son stood together near the barn entrance, talking in voices too low for me to hear. But I could see the tension in Jake's shoulders, the way his jaw clenched, the sharp gestures of his hands as whatever conversation they were having grew more heated. Finally, Thomas walked away and Jake stood there for a long moment, staring at the ground before turning back to me. The expression on his face made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, keep working the colt." His voice was clipped, professional, all the warmth from the past few days completely gone. "Jake, just do your job, Adrian." The words hit me like a slap. I watched him walk away, disappearing into the stable office and closing the door firmly behind him. I finished working with the colt on autopilot, my mind racing. What had his father said? Did he know? Had he seen something? I didn't see Jake again until dinner, where he sat at the far end of the table and didn't meet my eyes once. When the meal was over, he left without a word while the rest of us lingered over coffee. Marcus found me later that evening, sitting on the bunkhouse steps and staring up at the stars. "Whatever's going on between you and Jake," the older man said without preamble, "I'd suggest you be careful." My heart stopped. "I don't know what." "Kid," Marcus's voice was kind but firm. "I've been around long enough to recognize when two people are trying real hard not to look at each other the way they want to, and I've been on this ranch long enough to know that Thomas Brennan has very specific ideas about what he wants for his son and his legacy." "Did he say something to Jake?" "Don't know the details, but I know Thomas has been talking about Jake settling down, starting a family, continuing the Brennan name. He's been pushing it more since his accident, worried about his mortality, I guess. And Jake," Marcus sighed, "Jake spent his whole life trying to be the son his father wants. Sometimes that means burying parts of himself." "So what are you saying?" Yeah. "I'm saying that whatever you two have found, it's real. I can see that, but real doesn't always mean easy, and it doesn't always mean possible. You're both going to have to decide what you're willing to fight for." He left me with those words, and I sat there in the darkness, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. I'd spent weeks telling myself this was just a summer thing, that at the end of August I'd go back to school and this would all fade into a beautiful memory. But somewhere along the way, it had become so much more than that. I was falling in love with Jake Brennan, and that scared me more than anything else in my life ever had. Chapter 5: Distance. The next 2 weeks were torture. Jake threw himself into work with an intensity that left no room for anything else. He delegated most of my tasks to Marcus or the other hands, barely speaking to me except to give curt instructions. When I tried to approach him to ask what was wrong, he'd find an excuse to walk away. I felt like I was dying by inches. Tyler and Ben noticed the change, though they attributed it to work stress. There had been some problems with predators bothering the cattle, and a crucial piece of equipment had broken down, putting everything behind schedule. Jake was dealing with all of it with his typical competence, but the warmth I'd briefly glimpsed was completely gone, replaced by the stern, distant foreman I'd first met. I considered leaving, just packing my things and heading back to Denver early. Maybe that would be easier than this painful limbo. But something kept me rooted to the ranch, some stubborn part of me that refused to give up without understanding what had changed so drastically. The breakthrough came one evening when I was working late in the barn alone. I'd volunteered for the night check, partially because I was having trouble sleeping anyway, and partially because the quiet of the barn at night had become a comfort. I was checking the water troughs when I heard the barn door open. Jake stepped inside, freezing when he saw me. "I thought Tyler was on night check," he said. "We switched, he had a date in town." I straightened, my heart hammering. "Jake, can we please talk about—" "There's nothing to talk about." "The hell there isn't," the words burst out of me, months of carefully controlled emotion finally breaking free. "You kissed me, we spent that night together, you said we'd figure it out, and then you just shut me out completely. If you regret it, fine, but at least have the guts to tell me to my face instead of just ignoring me." His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he'd just walk away again, but instead he moved deeper into the barn, closer to where I stood. "You think I don't want to talk to you?" His voice was rough, strained. "You think I haven't been going insane keeping my distance?" "Then why?" "Because my father knows," the words exploded out of him. "I don't know how, maybe he saw something, maybe someone said something, but he knows, and he made it very clear what he thinks about it. About you. About what it means for this ranch, for the family name, for everything he's built." "What did he say?" Jake shook his head. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "He said I was being reckless, that I was risking everything over some summer fling with a confused college kid who'd be gone in a few weeks anyway." The pain in Jake's voice was palpable. "He said if I was going to insist on making mistakes with my life, I could at least have the decency to do it where it wouldn't reflect on the family business." I felt like I'd been punched. "And you believe him? You think that's all this is, a mistake?" "No, God, no." Jake ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "But Adrian, you are leaving in a few weeks. You have a life back in Denver, a degree to finish, a future that has nothing to do with this ranch or this life. And I'm here, I've always been here, this is who I am. So that's it, we just pretend nothing happened because the timing isn't perfect." What's the alternative? He stepped closer and I could see the anguish in his gray eyes. You stay here, give up your education, your plans, everything you've worked for, or I leave the ranch that's been in my family for 4 generations, abandon my father, abandon everything I've built my life around. Tell me how this works, Adrian, because I've been trying to figure it out and I can't see a way. I wanted to argue, to insist there had to be a solution, but the truth was I didn't have one either. The reality of our situation hit me like cold water. You're right, I said quietly. You're completely right. This was never going to work. I guess we both just got caught up in something that felt good and forgot about reality. Don't do that. His hand reached out, catching my arm before I could turn away. Don't make it sound like it didn't mean anything, like you don't mean anything. Then what do you want from me? I pulled away, suddenly angry at him, at his father, at the universe for making this so impossible. You want me to stay and watch you shut me out, pretend we're just coworkers while my heart breaks every time you look at me, or should I just leave now, make it easier on both of us? He stopped, the words seeming to catch in his throat. I want something I can't have. I want you and this ranch and my father's approval, and for the world to be different than it is. I want to be braver than I am. The admission broke something in both of us. I stepped forward at the same moment he did, and then we were kissing desperately, all the pent-up longing and frustration and heartbreak pouring into it. His hands were in my hair, mine gripping his shoulders, and for those few moments nothing else existed except the two of us and this thing between us that refused to die no matter how impossible it was. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I rested my forehead against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. I'm falling in love with you, I whispered, and I don't know how to stop. His arms tightened around me. Then don't stop, just give me time, let me figure this out, let me talk to my father again, see if I can make him understand. And if he doesn't, then I'll have to make a choice. He pulled back enough to look at me, his expression fierce. And Adrian, I'm starting to realize there's only one choice I can live with. Chapter 6, BRAKNG Free. The next day, Jake was gone before dawn. Marcus said he'd driven into town, something about equipment orders, but I suspected the real reason. He was going to talk to his father, really talk, not just accept Thomas's judgments and demands like he'd always done. I threw myself into work, trying not to watch the road for his truck, trying not to imagine how the conversation might be going. Tyler and Ben kept giving me concerned looks, and finally Tyler pulled me aside during lunch. Okay, seriously, what's going on? You've been weird for weeks and now you look like someone kicked your dog. Just personal stuff, I'll be fine. Does it have to do with Jake? I must have made a face because Tyler's eyes widened. Oh shit, are you and Jake? It's complicated. Dude, Tyler grabbed my shoulder. That's kind of awesome. I mean, Jake's a good guy and you've been happier here than I've seen you all summer until recently, and it makes so much sense now why. It doesn't matter if it's awesome, I interrupted. It's impossible, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, he has responsibilities here, his father. I stopped, not wanting to betray Jake's confidence. Tyler was quiet for a moment. You know, when I first came here I was running from stuff too. Bad breakup, family drama, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and my dad said something that stuck with me. He said that sometimes the thing you're most scared of is exactly what you need to run toward, not away from. Very philosophical. I'm serious, look, I don't know what's going on with you and Jake and I won't pry, but I've watched you both this summer. The way you are together, that's not nothing, man. That's the kind of thing people spend their whole lives looking for. Whatever obstacles are in the way, they can't be bigger than that. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. Jake didn't return until after dark. I was in the barn, ostensibly checking on a mare who was close to foaling but really just waiting. When I heard his truck pull up, my heart started racing. He found me in the stable, his face unreadable in the dim light. How did it go? I asked. About as well as could be expected. He leaned against the stall door, suddenly looking exhausted. My father's, he's old-fashioned, set in his ways, he doesn't understand, maybe he never will. My heart sank. Jake. But you know what I realized today? He looked up at me, and there was something different in his eyes, determination maybe, or resolution. I've spent my entire life trying to be the son he wanted. The perfect rancher, the responsible one, the one who'd carry on the legacy exactly the way he envisions it. And in doing that, I've buried so much of who I actually am that I almost forgot there was anything else there. He pushed off from the door, moving closer to me. You made me remember, he continued. You came here, this city kid who'd never mucked a stall in his life, and you worked your ass off. You didn't do it to prove anything to anyone, you did it because you wanted to figure out who you were, and watching you do that, seeing you become more yourself every day, it made me realize I've been doing the opposite my whole life. What are you saying? I'm saying I told my father the truth today, all of it. About you, about me, about what I want my life to look like. And when he said I had to choose between this ranch and being who I really am, I chose me. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture that had become achingly familiar. I chose us. I couldn't breathe. Jake, this ranch means everything to you, your family legacy. Means nothing if I'm living a lie to preserve it. His voice was firm, sir. Adrian, I don't know how we'll make this work. Long distance is going to be hard. You've got school, I've got responsibilities here that I'm not abandoning just because my father and I don't see eye to eye. But I want to try, I need to try, because what I feel for you is real and I'm done pretending otherwise. Your father will come around eventually, or he won't. But that's his choice to make, not mine. I can't live my life based on his approval anymore. I pulled him close, kissing him like I was trying to convince myself this was really happening, that we'd actually found a way through the impossible maze we'd been lost in. I love you, I said against his lips. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I love you. Not as crazy as you think. He smiled, really smiled, without reservation or guardedness, and it transformed his entire face. I've been in love with you since you fell off that fence trying to impress me during your second week here and then tried to play it off like you meant to do it. I did mean to do it. I was demonstrating the importance of workplace safety by showing what not to do. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and I realized I'd never heard him really laugh before. We spent the rest of the night in that barn, making plans, talking about how we'd make the distance work, about him maybe coming to Denver some weekends, about me coming back during breaks. It wouldn't be easy, we both knew that, but for the first time it felt possible. Chapter 7, New BGNNGS. My last 2 weeks at the ranch flew by in a blur of work and stolen moments with Jake. Thomas stayed in the main house, and there was a coolness between father and son that made my heart ache. But Jake seemed at peace with his decision, more relaxed and open than I'd ever seen him. Marcus approached me one afternoon, a knowing smile on his weathered face. Looks like you two figured things out. Is it that obvious? Only to anyone with eyes. He clapped me on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think Jake made the right choice. Man needs to live his own life, not the one someone else planned for him, and you're good for him. Help him remember there's a world beyond this ranch. The ranch is important to him though. Sure it is, but a place can't love you back, son. People can, you remember that. The night before I was supposed to leave, Jake took me on one last ride up to the high pasture. We sat on a rock outcropping as the sun set, the whole valley spread out below us in shades of gold and purple. I'm going to miss this, I said, not just meaning the view. You'll be back in 6 weeks for fall break. 6 weeks feels like forever. Yeah, he pulled me closer, his arm around my shoulders. But we'll make it work, and Adrian, when you come back I want you to meet my father properly, really talk to him, let him see what I see when I look at you. You think he'll ever accept this? I think people can surprise you. He's stubborn, but he's not cruel. He wants me to be happy, he just had specific ideas about what that should look like. Maybe, given time, he'll realize happiness doesn't always come in the package you expect. We sat there until the stars came out, neither of us wanting the evening to end, both knowing that tomorrow would bring a goodbye that felt too hard, too final, even with all our promises and plans. The morning I left, the whole crew came out to see me off. Tyler and Ben gave me their numbers, making me promise to stay in touch. Marcus hugged me tight, whispering, "You take care of that boy's heart. It's the first time he's trusted anyone with it." Jake loaded my bags into my car, his movements slow, reluctant. When everything was packed, we stood there in the early morning light, not quite ready to let go. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. "This is just see you soon." 6 weeks, I agreed, though my voice was rough with unshed tears. 6 weeks? He pulled me into a tight embrace, not caring who saw, and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and pine and summer mornings. When we finally pulled apart, he pressed something into my hand, a small carved wooden horse, smooth and perfect. "My grandfather made these," he said, "carved one for every important moment in his life. This one's for you, for this summer, for us." I couldn't speak, just clutched the small carving and nodded. The drive back to Denver was long and lonely. But as I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake, already counting down the days. "Love you, city boy." I smiled through my tears and typed back, "Love you too, cowboy." Epilogue 6 months later. The winter wind whipped across the ranch, but inside the main house it was warm and bright. I'd come back for winter break, and this time Jake had insisted I stay in the house rather than the bunkhouse, a small step but a significant one. Dinner was a tentative affair. Thomas sat at the head of the table, Jake and I on either side. The older man was polite but distant, clearly still adjusting to the reality of his son's choices. But he'd agreed to have me there, which felt like progress. "Adrian's been teaching me about marketing strategies," Jake said during a lull in conversation. "His ideas for promoting the ranch as a sustainable tourism destination could really help us diversify income." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Tourism? Just an idea," I said quickly. "A lot of ranches are finding success with educational programs, workshops, that sort of thing. It could help ensure the ranch thrives long-term without having to sell off land." For the first time, Thomas looked at me with something other than cool assessment. "You've thought about the ranch's future." Of course, it's important to Jake, which makes it important to me. Something shifted in the older man's expression, not quite acceptance but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Well, that's good to know." After dinner, Jake and I walked out to the barn to check on the horses. The sky was clear, stars brilliant against the black canvas of night. "That went better than last time," I observed. "Baby steps," Jake pulled me close, his warmth welcome against the cold. "He'll come around, and even if he doesn't completely, I've made my peace with it. I'm not giving this up, I'm not giving you up." "Good," I said, tilting my face up to kiss him, "because I'm not planning on making it easy for you to get rid of me. Wouldn't dream of it." We stood there in the winter night, and I thought about how far we'd both come since that first day when I'd been the terrified city boy who couldn't even saddle a horse. I'd come to the ranch looking for myself, and I'd found so much more. I'd found home, I'd found love, I'd found the courage to be who I really was. And in finding all of that, I'd helped Jake find it too. As we walked back to the house together, I caught sight of Thomas watching us from the window. He didn't wave or smile, but he didn't turn away either, just watched, thoughtful and considering. Maybe Tyler had been right. Maybe the things we're most scared of are exactly what we need to run toward, not away from. Maybe the most impossible love stories are the ones most worth fighting for. I squeezed Jake's hand, feeling the rough calluses that told the story of his life on this land, and he squeezed back. A promise, a commitment, a future we were building together one day at a time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Long distance, family complications. Two very different lives we were trying to merge. But as I looked at Jake's face in the starlight, saw the love and determination there, I knew we'd figure it out. We'd survived the summer, we'd survived the distance. We'd keep surviving, keep fighting, keep choosing each other. And that was more than enough. The end. Your thoughts matter too, US. Did Adrian and Jake's story touch your heart? The journey from that first tense moment in the stable to finding love against all odds was filled with emotion, growth, and the courage to be true to yourself. We'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in their story? Did the slow burn romance keep you engaged? How do you think Thomas will fully come around? If you loved this story, please subscribe, like, and comment below.